For some reason, I find the idea of thinking about Grail watches rather fascinating. And I must be overthinking this somewhat because I've subdivided Grail watches into lots of different categories. I think that there are fantasy Grail watches. These are those watches that are so expensive or so unachievable that are amazing and you think about, but you know you're never going to own them. I think there's a more traditional sort of idea of what a Grail watch is, and that for me is maybe something like a Rolex or an Omega or that sort of price range, which is achievable, but certainly expensive and certainly something you can only sort of really decide to buy in the future or work your way towards. I also think there are sort of more affordable watches that are also considered Grail watches because they're very hard to find those amazing watches in those price ranges. I even talk about the occasional Aliexpress Grail watch, which is a bit of a conflict with that sort of idea, but again, they're amazing watches for the prices from that particular website. But there's one subcategory of Grail watches that I think excite me the most, and that is mini Grail watches. Hello, you're watching James. My name's James, you're watching me, and I am talking about watches. And I know I'm not the first person to use the word mini Grail watch, but I'm not sure if the other sort of variations or thoughts about this one line up exactly with what I'm thinking about. So let me give you my definition of what I think a mini Grail watch is. In fact, let's start with what I don't think it is. A mini Grail watch for me is not a stepping stone watch. It is not, I want this Grail watch. This watch looks or feels a little bit like it. Maybe I'll buy that one first and work my way towards that Grail watch. No. I think a mini Grail watch is a watch that is much more affordable than some of these other ideas of Grail watches, yet by themselves are so magnificent, are so amazing that you want it in your collection and you are aiming for that watch, not for a higher watch, not for a more expensive Grail watch. These are things on watches that are so good, that are so amazing, that they deserve to be called Grail watches. And because they are not sort of more affordable watches, they are maybe watches that you might have to work your way towards a little bit, but not as much as other Grail watches, I'm calling them mini Grail watches. Watches that do require a little bit of savings, or perhaps sacrifice by selling some other watches, but you end up then buying a watch that is something extra special that will stay in your collection long term. And I guess in my head, if we're thinking about money, for me, the watches that I sort of consider that are in this category, the watches that I own that are in this sort of category, are somewhere between $1,000 Australian dollars up to probably around about 3,000 Australian dollars. And for me personally, I have 5 of these in my collection. I didn't realise it until I looked at my collection the other day. I stand there and look at my watches a bit. I enjoy looking at them. I love them. I like thinking about them. I like seeing what's in my collection and thinking about if there's any watches that I might sell. What watch would I like to wear today? What watches am I going to keep long term? All sorts of thoughts. And when I was looking at it and I was thinking about this idea of mini Grail watches, I realised I own 5. There's at least 2 more in my collection that I think could be on this list and should be on this list, but I'm going to leave them out deliberately. I'm going to leave them out deliberately because they could almost be interpreted as a bit of a stepping stone watch for some people. That is my Christopher Ward C60 and my Longines Hydro Conquest. I think they deserve to be on this list, but I sort of also understand that a black dialed diver, perhaps for some people, might be a watch on their journey towards something more expensive. So for this particular video, I'm not going to include them. However, just for your knowledge, I think they are actually on this list as well. But the 5 watches I want to share with you today start off with a watch from Tissot. Tissot is a brand that I've always liked, but I've really struggled to find a watch from their collection that I actually want to own. And what was very strange is when I did finally buy my first Tissot, it ends up being on my mini Grail list. This is the Tissot 1938, a watch that I knew I liked the moment I first saw a review of it. A watch that I think when it is new costs just over around $3,000, but you can find them on the second-hand market a little bit cheaper. I found this one second-hand and I realised at that price I had to own it. And I'm so glad that I did buy it because it has ended up being an incredible watch. One of my favourite watches in my collection, a watch that I wear a lot, and a watch that I absolutely include on this list. The next is a Stowa Classic 40 Type B Flieger, a watch that I sort of knew would be on this list when I was considering buying it. This is a watch that I sort of traded up to. I had a watch that looked a little bit similar because it is a Flieger, and I sold that one off. I'd sold a couple of watches, and I slowly worked my way towards owning this Stowa. I understand that perhaps You can buy other watches and own other watches that look a lot like this one, but there's something rather special about it. And at around 2,000 Australian dollars, it may seem expensive to some, but for me, it is the perfect Flieger and it is incredible. And I never would want to trade up from this watch because for me, it is my perfect Flieger. Whenever I talk about incredible watches or my favorite watches in my collection, I always have to talk about my Hamilton Jazzmaster GMT. And I've talked a lot about this watch. I'm not going to talk about it too much, but this watch is stunning. I absolutely love it. I adore the look of it. I adore the quality of it. And round about $1,000 will get you one of these. You may even find it slightly cheaper. Now I think you could almost add almost any model of Oris to this mini Grail list because almost every Oris that I've seen has been something rather incredible and something rather special. For me, this Artilia, this tuxedo watch that I call it, is probably the best looking watch I've ever seen. Not just within the Oris range, but ever. I love the details of this watch. I love the look of this watch. I love the quality of this watch. And these watches you can buy quite easily for around about 1,500 Australian dollars. And the great thing about this Artilia range, this sort of dressy sort of range, is that there are plenty of models available that all look quite different from each other. So if you're not keen on this one, there's likely to be something that you do like. Probably the biggest surprise for me is this Damasco DS30. I'd seen this a couple of years ago. I'd seen the brand, I'd seen it and thought, wow, that's really cool. I'd love to own one of these, but I didn't really expect to ever own one. I thought perhaps they were a little bit more expensive than I would want to spend on a watch that looked like this. But this one came up at a great price and I just couldn't help myself. I was really concerned about buying it because even though it was a great price, it was still a reasonable amount of money. But as soon as I got it in hand, those issues, those worries about this watch completely went away. This really has turned out to be one of the best watches that I own. I really love this watch. I wear it all the time and the quality is absolutely outstanding. Brand new, these are around about 2,000 Australian dollars. But if you can buy one secondhand like I did, this might be the perfect used watch because the quality is outstanding and the hardened case finish allows this watch to sort of keep going on even in the used market, so they look almost brand new. So that's my 5 watches in my collection that I consider mini Grail watches, but wait, I still have one more to show you, and this is my bonus watch. I'm calling it a bonus watch because it is a little bit more expensive than the price range that I set for myself. It's 1,000 to around about 3,000. This one I bought secondhand and was just above that 3,000 range. But when I bought it, I suddenly realized that this watch is even better than I expected. I know people rave about this watch. People go on and on about it. People have such great, strong opinions about it, and most of them are very positive. But it wasn't until I had the opportunity to buy it myself that I realized, okay, now I understand why everybody raves about this watch. This is the Tudor Black Bay 58. A watch that I knew I liked. I thought it looked great, but it wasn't a watch that I ever expected to buy for myself. I thought, yeah, it's very nice, but yeah, not for me. It's, you know, it's nothing too special looking. I get that it's going to be well made. I get that the size is really good and I know that would fit me too. But at this sort of price range, well, there's other watches that I would prefer, and there's other watches that I would prefer perhaps at slightly lower prices. But then of course, I bought it. And then of course, I realized I was wrong. This watch is something extra special. This may be pushing a little bit closer towards Grail watch versus mini Grail watch, but I think it has a really interesting position in the market at this price, especially if you can get one at a great price like I did. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate it, and I hope that you watch some of my other videos because it really helps me and this channel. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, it would make a big difference too. And perhaps watch these videos next.